The story goes that a guest minister for a congregation, he had been invited to this particular church for a week of preaching. Now, those of us with some southern rootage know that this is called a revival. So we have a guest minister coming to do a week of preaching to conduct a revival. There is a little old lady sitting in the church, and after the sermon, the little old lady comes to the door and shakes hands with this guest minister. And she says, "You're something else." He laughed, and he said, "I hope you come back tomorrow." And sure enough, tomorrow comes, evening comes, the service comes, and she's there, and the guest minister's there, and as he finishes his sermon and is standing at the door to shake hands with people, the little lady says, "You're something else." He smiled. She came back the next night, and the next night, and the next night, and every night she said, "You're something else." And he said to her on the very final night after his final sermon, "You know, I really appreciate your attendance, and I think you're probably one of the few people that has been here every single night, and I appreciate that very much. But I've been wondering what you meant when you have said night after night, 'You're something else.'" She said, "Well, that's easy. You're not a preacher. You're something else." Now, I think he got a real taste of what I would call straight talk. No dancing around, no playing with words, just right there to his face, straight talk. There are moments in our lives when, say, our mate, or mom, or dad, or brother, or sister, a coach, a teacher, a boss, lays some heavy words on us, and we recognize those words as being straight talk. So here we find Jesus on his way to Jerusalem in our Lenten journey that we're on, headed toward the cross in Jerusalem, and he gives the folk on this occasion straight talk. Now, Luke does not tell us in this passage how the people reacted to the straight talk. We don't know. But more than likely, when somebody gives us a straight and direct message, and it calls for us to change something about our lives, it probably does not set well, at least first. I am reminded of a complaint by St. Teresa. She said, "Oh God, it's no wonder you have so few friends, seeing how you treat them. It's no wonder." And another saint said that before God meets us as our friend, God confronts us as an adversary. And I believe it. God looks into a proud heart and by way of Jesus says, "You know, there's something about you that needs to die, that needs to change." So here we are on this third Sunday in Lent, and Jesus turns to us, and Jesus is saying, it is time for some straight talk. Yes, something, as we go to Jerusalem, something needs to die in you. Something needs to die to self. The great theologian Reinhold Niebuhr, late Reinhold Niebuhr, said, "Man is a sinner not because he is finite, but because he refuses to admit that he is." To serve yourself, friends, to serve yourself, to make yourself the chief at the very top of life, is a form of idolatry. And I sometimes have wondered if this sin of self is not a part of our DNA. Our theological ancestors have wrestled with and believe it, that it was a burden that was carried about. And if you were listening to Kevin as he read that passage from Psalm, the very last verse talks to you about the aspect of original sin. Look it up. Many of us will move heaven and earth to keep from facing a change in life. Now, I'm no longer a golfer. Yes, at one time I played golf, and then I moved to Texas, and someone invited me to play golf, and it was flat as a pancake, and I thought, what is this? This is like playing croquet. And I gave up golf. But I've always loved golf stories. So there was a man that was being interviewed by a large corporation. And a part of the interview process was the chief of the corporation says to the man, "Let's play golf." Well, the man had a sudden panic, knowing, first of all, that he had to play. Secondly, knowing that he hadn't played in a very, very long time. And knowing, third, that he had to make a very good impression. So the first thing he did is he went out and bought some snazzy clothes, some snazzy golf clothes. And he thought, this is the way Arnold Palmer would dress, or Ben Hogan would dress. The second thing he did is he went out and he got himself rented some snazzy golf clubs, and he met the employer at the country club. He teed up the ball, took a swing, and completely missed. Teed up the ball again, took a swing, and missed. And the third time, he teed up the ball. Now he's really in a panic. He teed up the ball, took a swing, and he missed the third time. He mops his brow, and he says, "Good grief, this is a tough course." Now, we might laugh at the golfer, but whether we're willing to admit or not, we need to recognize the fact that sometimes we blame our problem or problems on something else or someone. And Jesus is saying very clearly in Luke and then in John, you need to die to self if you want to live. He says this is not because he is angry with us, but because he loves us. He's concerned for us. Might we agree that the only person who has the right to speak to us so directly is someone that loves us in life? The late George Ross, maybe some would have remembered George Ross. He served a rather large and significant Episcopal church in Akron for many years. He died back in the, I would say, mid to late 70s. George Ross, an Episcopal priest, said on one occasion a man came to see him. And this man's wife had died only a few months before. And George had had her service, and he knew the family. And so the man comes to see George Ross, and he says, Reverend Ross, my wife and I were married for 60 years, and I want to give our church a significant gift because I want to do something in her memory. And George Ross said, well, that's wonderful. The man said, you know, my wife told me about a year before she died, there are 3 things that I like about you. There's 3 things that I like about you, honey. First of all, you're a snob. And secondly, you're weird. And third, honey, you're a pompous ass. That's what my wife said, Reverend. And through his tears, George Ross said, when she said that, I saw a twinkle in her eye. And my wife, you see, Reverend, had a great sense of humor. And then he said, you know, it's awfully hard to lose someone who really knows you and still loves you. So here comes Jesus' message from John. Unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains a single grain of wheat. If it dies, then it bears much fruit. He who loves his life singularly, he who loves his life must find a way to save one's life. Jesus is saying, no more hiding. It's a great moment then when Jesus looks us in the eye and we are willing to admit, at least to ourselves, he is correct. You have not chosen me, I have chosen you. That's Jesus talking. Whoever would gain his life or her life must be willing to lose life. That's Jesus talking. Will you follow me to the cross? That's Jesus talking. Amen.